Wednesday now, a week out from NFL free agency beginning. We got a great show planned today. Some news around the NFL yesterday as the franchise tag deadline passed. So that came. And some other interesting news in the NFL we'll get to here in the opening segment, including some updates on Dallas Goedert and the contract situation there. J-Mac, how you doing on this Wednesday morning, my friend?
Doing well. Yeah. 4. We're up 100% in tags from last year, 2. So 2 to 4. So that continues to go in a lower fashion than it typically did in prior years. I think a lot of teams have gotten smart and don't want to use it if they don't have to use it. And the ones that do use it obviously are concerned they might lose particular players and still going to work to get a long-term deal done by July. So, something the Eagles haven't used in over a decade because they haven't needed to use it, and they tend to work out deals with the players they want to work out with. So I would say that's a positive. If you have to use it, it's a negative. And Breece Hall with the Jets, obviously, not as high as a franchise tag for a running back because that position is devalued. We talk about that a lot, even though it doesn't make sense. Daniel Jones gets the transition. You never see the transition tag.
Yeah.
The Colts are kind of concerned because there's obviously desperate teams. He was playing well, even with the injury, and they want him back. So, but yeah, very little movement in the franchise transition tag markets as there has been now for 2 consecutive years. And I think you'll see that continue because nobody wants those big numbers for 1 year on their salary cap either. So it doesn't make a lot of sense from either side.
No doubt about it. John, I saw yesterday you retweeted the Spot Track account based on Dallas Goedert. I think this needs some clarity, John, in Eagle land with Dallas Goedert's contract. There is a big number that still shows there's a dead cap number that, as you always say, that's not going anywhere. That's not going to change. That's already, basically in the past. But how's it work with Dallas Goedert's contract? And do you think that changes the Eagles' approach to maybe a negotiation with Dallas Goedert? It's coming out that, they're trying to talk to Goedert, but I don't know. I mean, maybe he's gone. Maybe Matthew Berry's right. Maybe Matthew Berry's not right. And they do sign Dallas Goedert. We've yet to find that out, and we will find that out next week. But when it comes to the contract, the cap hit, the dead cap hit, and all the things that are tied up in Goedert because they've had the player for so long and they've done a lot of things with his contract, how much does that impact the decision on Dallas Goedert here in free agency?
Well, I think what impacts the decision is if you're going to sign a similar number player, which I don't think they're going to do. So, and it's a tough market to gauge. I've been talking about with Dallas Goedert. You have the 13 touchdowns on one hand. On the other hand, he dropped dramatically as a blocker. So I don't know how teams see that, especially at his age. So is he going to get 2 years, $25 million? Is he going to get 2 years, $13 million, something like that? Then obviously the Eagles are out. But just sign David Njoku people, you would think that would be in a similar range, and it would be much better to keep Dallas Goedert simply because of all the void years you already have on his contract, which all get accelerated, and he's still on your cap for significant money. It'd be far better to work out that same type of contract with him than an outside player, which again is how we will tell you is not a great PR move, because if you sign somebody like Njoku, that's a great PR move. But if you re-sign somebody like Dallas Goedert, it's considered, well, he's already an Eagle, so it's considered not that big of a deal, even though it's the same thing from an unrestricted free agent standpoint, and it would help you under the cap because, even though Dallas's contract expires, he's got void years through 2029. So this is how do the Eagles pay all their players? This is how the Eagles pay all their players. because they spread it out over these void years. And ultimately that credit card bill becomes due when the player leaves. So that's what you're dealing with Dallas Goedert.
John, is there any big concerns with that setup? I mean, it's something the Eagles have done for a while, and fans outside of Philly love to kind of badger Philly. I see this all the time. Hogan in the chat, he always does it to Philly fans in the chat. He always talks about, the credit card bill is going to come. You're not going to be able to pay everybody forever. Is this something that Eagle fans should be concerned about, that the chickens could come home to roost, or is it something that's kind of malleable and how we can just continue to shake and bake, continue to push things off, continue to manipulate the cap, if you will, and keep creating the space he needs to sign the players he wants?
It's definitely malleable, but it's real, So you have as usual, you have two extremes. You have that extreme that says the chickens are gonna come home to roost, the world is gonna collapse. That's not gonna happen. And then you have the other extreme, which the salary cap is not real. It is real. And, if you play with it to the level the Eagles have, and part of the reason they've had this stretch is because they played with it the way they have. And what they do is they spend a lot of cash up front, and they have for the past decade before last year, more than anybody else. And you say, well, how do the Eagles do it? Well, this is how they do it. So you give them the money, the dead money, again, that's already gone. That's a Jeffrey Lurie problem. That's not a problem for anybody but Jeffrey Lurie. That money's already paid. It's gone. The cap issue is the bigger deal when you're in the moment and you're trying to obviously build your 53-man roster to 2026. And that's impactful. And you have to, that's why the Eagles have gone this route where they don't have a middle class, really. They pay a bunch of stars, and then they try to fill in with either young rookie players on the rookie deals or the 1-year Tamu guys. So that's sort of the result of it's already happened. That's what's going on in large part because of all these void years. Now, when you hit on players like Lane Johnson, most notably, they've redone his contract so many times I can't even count. Everything's fine. When you don't, then it becomes everything's about evaluation. Now they've gotten what 8 years out of Dallas. I think he's going on his 9th year. I mean, he's he's in the successful category. You got a lot out of him. But if you are talking about that switch over, because I saw some Njoku stuff yesterday, that makes no sense other than if you think Dallas can't play because you're bringing in a guy at a similar number, maybe more. And you already have these void years hanging on with Dallas Goedert. So if you're going to bring somebody back at $10 million, let's use $10 million. You're better bringing him back unless you think, well, he can't block anymore or he's completely done as a football player, which I don't think. So that's kind of the discussion you have to have if you're Howie Roseman. But there's a lot of things going on with Dallas Goedert as far as forcing him to take the pay cut. Very complicated situation. Other than I know he likes it here and it's been his only professional home. I don't see many reasons to stay. And if you're doing, but again, before we came on, you were talking about Drew Dahlman retiring at 27. And we went through a little of that here in Philadelphia with Landon Dickerson. Typically, again, the normal mode is, well, Landon Dickerson's not going to give all his signing bonus money back. He's not going to walk away at 27 with $19 million on the table and plus another. He's not going to walk away. 99% of the time, that's correct. Drew Dahlman just walked away. Why? I don't know. But, everybody's
that's
different.
a big hit for the Bears, John.
Everybody's different. Everybody's different. Chris Borland walked away. I talk about him all the time. There's a lot of Jaelan Phillips retired at UCLA. Grant Calcaterra retired at Oklahoma because of the concussion just
He almost didn't play. That's right.
barrage of, they were scared. You had all this being thrown at you, how dangerous this was. And then, in Grant, because I talked to Grant about it, I haven't talked to Jaelan about it, but, it's like he went to, some of the top doctors in the country and they said, no, you're fine. You can play, but he didn't have that information. He's like watching the movie and reading and saying, oh, I could be and he goes, yeah. And there was that widespread fear among certain players. So, I mean, that kind of stuff is an example, but everybody's different.
John, you've been doing the AJ Brown meter of like you give the 53-47, latest it was 51-49. Can you do that meter for Dallas Goedert on returning versus going? Where is that for you?
60-40 going. But that's much higher than it was earlier. Once he took that pay cut, I was like, well, this is it. He took a $4.25 million pay cut.
Yeah. It's big.
But, from every indication, he definitely, I know he loves it here. I mean, the area and but it is a business and
he's also over 30. He probably wants to maximize his earnings.
Yeah, this is absolutely
trying to maximize their earnings.
This is absolutely his last chance to get a multi-year deal. And I don't even know if he gets it this time. But this is absolutely his last chance. And then he's on the year-by-year program.
John, last question here before we got Mike Gill, we got Brandon Lee Gowton today. We got a full Wednesday slate. Appreciate everybody being here. Hit that like button. John, last question here in opening segment number 1 for the Philadelphia Eagles and what's to come here with the free agency starting next week. Yesterday, John, it was put out that the Vikings and Jonathan Greenard might part ways and they could be seeking a trade partner. Now, I'm not going to, immediately tie him to the Eagles, but my question for you is, how much are we not talking about the potential for one of those outside moves to happen? Like, I think when we think about edge and tight end, we look at draft and we look at free agents that are upcoming, but the trade market, exists obviously in a big way, and Howie's been pretty successful at doing it. Greenard just reminded me, hey man, there's a lot of different ways to get players. It's not just free agency and the draft. How much of that do you think is relevant for the Eagles, and how much of that do you think they could be a player in this offseason in the trade market, whether it be at edge, if Phillips walks, whether it be at tight end, whether it be wherever, insert name here?
Yeah, very, very. I mean, it's easier to do it just the conventional way, but Howie's done it in multiple ways and uses every avenue possible. So we talked about it with Crosby. We talked about it with Michael Mayer. We never stopped talking about it. I see Michael Mayer at tight end.
Right.
Wide receiver, if they move AJ, that's a trade out. You might have a trade in somewhere, if they can find somebody elsewhere. With Greenard, great player. I mean, he to me, he'd be a home run acquisition at his current contract. But the reason they're thinking about trading him is because they have cap space issues and he wants more money. So he's not coming in for $19 million. If he's coming in for $19 million, yeah, by all means,
that's
give up the second round pick and be done with it. But it's not going to happen. You're going to have to work out a new deal. So it's a little bit more complicated than maybe on paper. But I mean, all we've been talking about is Maxx Crosby. Maxx Crosby this, Maxx Crosby
that. Yeah, I feel
that.
like he's the obvious name,
Yeah.
So, Greenard just I like hearing the name. It's like, oh, good player, and if he's available, I wonder who else. Sometimes it's hard to gauge, obviously, because teams aren't always open about who's available, but you talk about it all the time, man. It's a business. People will move. Teams will move players. So, you think Greenard is a fit at all, or an option for them?
Oh yeah, I think he's a great player, but again, wherever he's going, if he is going, wherever he's going, he's getting a raise. So you're going to have
Tanner McKee a 4th for you, Minnesota. What do you think?
I think they prefer the 2. Which I would give up the 2 for him. He's very good player. But yeah, again, you're going to have to redo the contract and get him up to 25, the same range as Jaelan Phillips. So, they want Jaelan Phillips back. All the stuff will open up if they don't get Jaelan Phillips back. A little bit different style. Is he a better fit for the Eagles than Jaelan Phillips? I would say no. I mean, everybody saw Jaelan. Boy, for whatever reason, it's so weird to me. I guess it's just the sack numbers. Like watch the final eight games, whatever it was. Watch his impact on that defense. Listen to Vic talk about his impact on that defense because I asked him about it on the record. Dude was awesome.
So that's how Vic sees it. But do you think Howie cares about the sack numbers and stuff?
No, I don't. I think he cares about getting good players. I think, And by the way, interesting.
Whether right or wrong, I think that's what people go to, because you're talking about a big contract. So it's not, if you're talking about 18 million or whatever, all right, you can live with maybe lesser sack numbers. But when you get to that $25 million range that we've discussed with Jaelan Phillips, I think that's where the expectation changes to not only being a great every down player, but also finishing and getting to the quarterback and making.
Well, I do. And there's certain guys, and Trey Hendrickson is now going to be unrestricted. The Bengals didn't tag him. And, there are guys who are closers. Ironically, because we're talking about Greenard, he had a bad season from a sack standpoint.
Yeah, he did.
But his pressure numbers were better than ever. So, and then he got hurt and he missed, I don't know, for a final month or so. But that was more of, they weren't in the playoff hunt and they shut him down. I don't think it was serious. So I'm not concerned about the injury, but his pressure numbers were never better. So nobody looks at him and says, well, he's down because he's been a 12 sack guy and he got 3 or 4, whatever he got. Because sometimes it is just circumstance. Now there are certain guys, and Maxx is one of them. Trey Hendrickson's one of them. Obviously, Miles and Micah. They're going to be consistent. They're always going to get home, and there's something to that. But I think there's even levels like I don't compare Trey Hendrickson and Maxx Crosby with Micah Parsons and Myles Garrett. I don't think they're in the same category. They don't impact the game as much. They're very good pass rushers. And what concerns me about Maxx Crosby and why I'm not even near Maxx Crosby if I'm the Eagles, simply because the guy has played so much football. I saw a stat, and I meant to double check it, but I believe it, so I'm going to throw it out there. And if it's wrong, I'll correct it because I have to look. He's played 600 more snaps than the number 2 guy over the past 4 or 5 years. He never leaves the field. I've been talking about it for years. He never leaves.
You bring that up with Bond too, where you're like, his age is his age, but his playing age is a lot less. He hasn't played that much football. Yeah, it's the opposite with Maxx.
Opposite. I'm not going there. I'm just not. I'm not saying he's a bad player, but he's not in the same category as Micah Parsons or Myles Garrett. It's not even. I don't like that comparison at all. And what he played, I saw him last year with Jalen Carter. I mean, the guy played 1,000 snaps more than anybody else, and the next year he comes back and he's not the same guy.
Right.
And he's 23, 24 years old.
Yep.
So I would stay unless you're going to get real disciplined, which Vic has, one of the few things you can criticize him for. He's not being disciplined with Jalen Carter's snap counts, so I don't think he'll be disciplined with Maxx Crosby snap counts. So yeah, I would go in a different direction. But if you're trading for somebody like Greenard, you got to give up a 2nd-round pick and you got to give him a new contract. So it's not as easy. I just signed Jaelan Phillips.
We'll see what they end up doing. Free agency about a week away, everybody. Monday is the legal negotiating period, which kicks off. Wednesday is free agency, a week out from today. John, I think the legal negotiating period kicks off Monday at noon, if I'm not mistaken. I think it's noon, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So stay tuned, everybody. We'll see if we get any news on that Monday or Tuesday, or we got to wait till Wednesday. I think it's going to come pretty early for a couple of these guys, Goedert, Phillips, maybe Reed, but I could see Reed holding off. We'll see what ends up happening. With that, we got the great Mike Gill in the green room. John, we haven't talked to Mike in a few weeks. He made it home safe. Let's go to him right now. He joins us here.